Suspended Western Cape Judge John Hlophe has approached the High Court again in an attempt to halt the pending impeachment vote against him. The National Assembly is expected to vote to remove the controversial judge next week, Wednesday. This comes after he was found guilty of gross misconduct. However, Judge Hlophe has now approached the courts to have this urgent interdict application against this decision to be heard the day before Parliament votes for his removal. But let's unpack this, and for that we're joined by a research consultant from Freedom Under Law, Chris Oxtoby. Chris, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a matter that we've been watching unfold, goodness, for years, really, and I think it's important also that South Africans really get to understand the politics behind this and what it means for the trust that we have for the judiciary. But I think let's start with this. Your initial thoughts as Freedom Under Law, hearing that Judge Hlophe is heading to the courts once again to try and halt this impeachment.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. Look, I think on one level it's not a great surprise. I think it's something that many people would have anticipated, that the judge would turn to the courts at some stage in this process. He has in fact already made an application to approach the Constitutional Court, and the basis of this interdict that we're speaking about is to stay the impeachment vote until the Constitutional Court decides that case. So it has been a characteristic, unfortunately, of this whole process that it has been litigated in the courts, or it's had to be litigated in the courts at many stages. And I think it is important to remember, as you've alluded to, that this matter really goes on a long time. It revolves around a complaint that was initially lodged against the Judge President in 2008. It's taken us this long to get to the process where it seemed next week the National Assembly was finally going to actually vote on whether or not he should be removed from office. So there's obviously a major concern that this is possibly yet another delay in this very long and very drawn-out process. So that is certainly a matter for concern.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big questions is, of course, is how long these delays really can last. So if he approaches the court next week, Tuesday, the day before the impeachment vote is set to happen, does that mean that the vote does not continue? And how successful is he likely to be on Tuesday, in your view?
Well, that's the essence of what the court will have to decide on Tuesday. At most, I think, if he is granted the order on Tuesday, it would hold off. It would mean that the vote couldn't go ahead. The decision by the Constitutional Court would then come through at some point in time. And then if his application to review the process is not successful, then the vote would just have to be reconvened at a later point. So in that scenario, it only delays the vote a little bit. Of course, if he is successful in his court application, then we're back at square one.
Yeah.
Exactly how things are going to go out on Tuesday, I would be loath to make too much of a prediction. Of course, one important thing to bear in mind is that if the Constitutional Court makes its judgment between now and Tuesday on his application for direct access to that court, then the need for this interdict may fall away. So there are quite a few moving parts, and things could still change between now and Tuesday.
Yeah, and I also see this as a great opportunity for us to almost educate South Africans, really, if you will, about, separation of powers in the country, where you've got the Portfolio Committee of Justice and Correctional Services having resolved last year that the National Assembly must go ahead and work towards removing Judge John Hlophe as well as Judge Nkola Motata, but we're going to focus on Judge John Hlophe. Is it not problematic then that you could have a high court start to then slow down processes that are taking place within Parliament? And where do the two then allow each other to do their work without getting in each other's way?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, one of the issues that Judge Hlophe is raising is about the processes that Parliament followed or at least the Portfolio Committee followed in deciding to recommend the case to the full National Assembly to vote on his removal. The counter argument is that there's already a very carefully set out procedure where the Judicial Service Commission has a whole fact-finding exercise and makes a recommendation on whether or not he should be removed from office. That's a decision that goes through several stages at a Judicial Service Commission level. So it's quite a carefully calibrated process to make sure that it's not too easy to remove a judge from office. And of course, we don't want it to be too easy to have a judge impeached, because that has a potential risk for their independence. So we are in uncharted waters here. We've never got this far down the road of possibly removing a judge from office before. So to some extent, why we're having some of the delays and some of the court processes is that it is unknown territory. We haven't done this before. We are fine tuning some of the ground rules for how it works. And Judge Hlophe has shown that he's very happy to take these points and to take these points to the courts. At the end of this process, when we finally get there, I think we will have a much clearer idea of how the different stages work. But at the moment, this is one more hurdle in the road that is going to be ironed out. And if the vote goes ahead eventually and is in favor of removing him from office, this would in fact be the first time that a judge in South Africa has ever been removed from office. So we are in quite unique territory here. I think it is important to remember that as well. And
I imagine then it would be an opportunity to set quite a precedent then. And just a reminder, of course, to our viewers that the Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe really was found guilty of gross misconduct, and that was back in 2021 for trying to influence two justices of the Constitutional Court in 2008 in the matter involving former President Jacob Zuma. And a lot of the wording that we see the Judge President using is, of course, words like alleged undue political pressure to remove him from office. People who dislike him actively pursued the JSC process until it amounted to that finding of gross misconduct. That word of political pressure, when we're talking about the judiciary, what does that do to the way that South Africans view our judiciary?
I think I'd firstly push back on the characterization of the process that you're describing as political pressure. I mean, I think there are obviously organizations that have fought hard to stop the matter being swept under the carpet. But that also is important to look at as an attempt to make sure that there is accountability among judges for when they do commit acts of serious misconduct. But yes, I mean, I think fundamentally the point about what this does for public confidence is important. I mean, the judiciary has been so celebrated and held up as being almost beyond some of the political challenges and machinations that we've experienced. So to see it then become embroiled in something like this, I'm sure there is a danger that people will have concerns about the judiciary being caught up in things that you really don't want it to be. But at the same time, it's there's a process here that is here for a reason. That if judges do commit some serious misconduct, such as what Judge Hlophe has been found guilty of, then it's important that the system is able to put it bluntly, remove the bad apples from the system, and that in itself is very important to I think to ensure public credibility, that people know that judges who are guilty of serious misconduct don't continue on the bench, and that there is a process that works to remove them in those extreme cases. Okay.
Yeah, Chris, we could talk for a long time, and I imagine that perhaps there'll be more to talk about after next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, depending on what the court does rule as Judge President John Hlophe approaches, or Western Cape Judge John Hlophe approaches the High Court next week, Tuesday.